Hey guys, welcome to our webinar today, how top retailers are winning on shrink. My name's Greg Busick, president of IHL Group, and I've got with me today Chief Commercial Officer of Gatekeeper Systems and Face First, Craig Greenberg. Hey Craig.
Hey, Greg, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good deal. Hey Corey from LPRC, Director of Research. He's joining as well.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
All right. And as always, we've got Lee Holman from IHL that's going to be joining. Hey, we want you guys to get involved there with the chat. So go ahead. On the right side, you'll see chat. Tell us where you're from. Who's your favorite sports team? What's your favorite AI tool that you're using? For me, it's Claude and the second brain that I've been able to develop with that. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're coming in from for things. And we want to make this interactive. So use this to provide questions for us throughout. And we'll get to those as we come to the end there. With that, let's go ahead and move forward with the economic update. So inflation, the government talks about inflation of 3.8%. Now, there's a little problem with the government inflation factor that inadvertently makes this thing go up. At the top level, 3.8%. What's in there, certainly gas prices have rolled things up. However, the thing that's in there that is an issue is the fact that we have a made up number in the US inflation data that is what they think you can rent your home for. And during the shutdown, that data was not added in. And so they put that back in, which has elevated the cost of inflation there. A much better measure that we always found is Truflation, which is more of a Nielsen ratings approach when it comes to inflation at 2% there. So it's certainly higher than it's been, but it's not necessarily as high as what the government data is telling us. So that's a better view of inflation overall. Let's look at some other measures. Without question, gas prices are the biggest thing driving everything right now. Nationally, we're at $4.51, which is up about a buck 38 from where we were a year ago. I wanted to alert you to, I guess, just looking at the map. Of course, you guys know this. If you're in California, you're paying about $2 more a gallon than the people that are in that southern region are paying for gas there. So there's a big disparity, and that has a big impact on what happens at retail, because every penny sustained is $2 billion in consumer spend over a year. So as this goes up, we start sucking things out. And so, you know what? One thing that just seemed to be uncanny, every time the government gives out money in any way, whether that's through reducing taxes or in giving tax buyouts for any reason, it's uncanny how gas prices go up. And I put this together with Gemini yesterday as we were looking at it. And we just go all the way back to the year 2000. And every time there was a reduction in taxes or a giveaway like we had in COVID, we see this rapid increase in fuel prices. So the rule here, or I guess the thing that is most notable, is if you hear the government giving out more money or doing a tax cut, buy oil stocks. That'll be a good decision for you, because it's just uncanny. There's always something that happens. And obviously the war is the thing that's happening right now that are driving up prices, but there's always something. What we can't dismiss, though, is the resiliency of the customer. And honestly, the resiliency of the customer right now is because of those lower tax rates and the bigger tax refunds that people are getting back with things. We see the prices of where things are going up, but we look at things and we look at retail sales. It's amazing to me that retail sales are up a good 4 to 6%, depending on the month, on whatever the inflation rate is. This is real credit card data. So this isn't any estimated data. This is over 9 billion transactions that are being done with the NRF and CNBC retail monitor with Affinity credit card solutions here. So the consumer continues to spend. I do not know how long that money is going to last. Home Depot had their results today. They were strong. I think that really reflects the K-shaped economy that we're going to talk about here in a second. The people that are squeezed the most are the lower income folks when it comes to transportation. It's a much higher percentage of their budget. It can be up to 20% of their overall budget is just energy related, whereas it's much smaller for higher incomes. So if you follow IHL at all, you'll notice that back when we were turning before the war started, I was saying expect home improvement to see a big bump because it's been down for several years. And as people get higher tax refunds, they're going to start doing that home improvement type of activity. Home Depot got a little of that today, beating earnings this morning. And you can see that overall, though, it's not really great for that sector because of things. But I want to alert you to this piece right here, this sporting goods, hobbies, and bookstores still high. Digital products, that makes sense. Here, eating out, but clothing and accessories. This is still a discretionary purchase and it's still strong through April. So that still shows that the consumer is spending and it's what's driving the overall economy there. So we do have a K-shaped economy, though, where the top 20% of earners are driving the considerable amount of spending that we're having in retail. And those in the bottom 80%, less and less of that spending. And that's dropping even further as we get here into 2026 and the rise of the fuel prices. So retail is becoming more and more a higher end consumer type of business for everybody. So how does that transform into what's happening with retailers and what they're planning to do? So we've got literally FDCM for us is food, drug, convenience, and mass merchants. That is your fast front checkout environment where transaction speed is critical. PMS, where you have more service oriented, so specialty hard, specialty soft, and department stores, a little slower transaction there. And then hospitality being your restaurants and lodging chains and casinos and cruises and that sort of thing. So we're seeing strong growth for all of them in terms of annual sales and what they're expecting for 2026. Profitability as well, with the strongest profitability coming from that food, drug, convenience, and mass merchants. We had tariffs and people affected by tariffs. That information is happening where people are literally raising prices. And if you followed us in the past, you can see retailers have a pass. They can just blame the government. They can blame the president for the tariffs. And they can actually raise the prices the same percentage that are in people's minds. But when that filters through the profit and loss statement, that actually increases their profits overall as a result. So it's almost like a hall pass, so to speak, to raise prices at the same level that's in the news, because customers expect that in their mind, and that's increasing profits overall. And you're seeing that in almost every case. Retailers, their profits are going up, at least the public retailers. So there is a big difference in retail performance based on how people are approaching technology. So early adopters are about 20%, fast followers about 30%. These folks drive a lot more profitability and a lot more sales growth, as we're seeing in the data. So here's a way of looking at this here. So this is sales growth going into 2026. The early adopters in technology, this is a race, and they are racing ahead of things here. So at 12% increase in sales there for those that are tech early adopters, whereas you look at the laggards, we're down in the 1.9% sales growth. It's even pronounced as well in profit growth, and we'll get to that a little bit later here. There's also a big difference in terms of what is happening with regards to IT spending, okay, and what is happening there. The leaders, these are people that grew their sales or their profits 10% or more in 2025. They are spending at a rate that's literally 4 times that of those that are laggards, which are those who are flat or negative sales increases. These leaders tend to be people that separated their IT spend from their sales growth. And about 5 years ago, they started investing, realizing that they're in an IT war with Amazon. And as a result, they're spending a lot more on IT to get ahead. And obviously, that means more clean data today, more systems and IoT at the store, complexity at the store, but all leading to the use of AI tools going forward. So the winners are playing a different game. Our topic today is about computer vision. And what we're seeing is the sales winners are 33 times more likely to already be using computer vision compared to everybody else within things. So we're not even comparing to laggards here. We're comparing to the average retailer, that the people that are sales winners are 33 times more likely to be using computer vision. And they're spending on IT, as we saw in the previous chart there, literally is 7 times higher than the laggards. when it comes to their actual spending. So the sales winners in particular, the profit winners are spending 7.4. The previous chart was sales winners. This is profit winners. So as I mentioned earlier, so the sales winners are about 4 times higher, profit winners 7 times higher than the profit laggards in terms of their spending on IT. And that brings us to our study today, which is how top retailers are winning on shrink. And this is really talking about how CFOs need to look at shrink and that margin loss and using loss prevention technology like facial recognition and computer vision as a lever for EBITDA, not just a security expense. And there's a mindset shift there that includes not only this aspect of it, but it gets into returns as well and reverse logistics, all those places where you're losing margin today. Those are opportunities to use technology to improve your effectiveness. In the situation, it's a huge issue. Inventory distortion, or the cost of overstocks and out of stocks, is a $1.7 trillion annual cost. And we're literally looking at retailers today that are losing ground when it comes to shrink. Overall, we have $142 billion in losses at the end of 2025 related to shrink, theft, and the organized retail crime aspects of things as well. At the same time, technology being deployed with a 300% return for first year ROI when visual intelligence solutions are deployed with less than a 6-month payback. And we'll go through all these numbers as we go forward. Several studies here. I don't want to go through all of them because we are going to talk about them at length as we go through here in different slides. But there are big differences that are happening between the top performing retailers and those that are laggards in this technology, and in this particular technology, specifically when it comes to computer vision and facial recognition. And so we've got this margin problem. And what we've been able to work with this is numbers from McKinsey as well as our own data, is basically it's a 16-to-1 cost. A $10 theft means you've got to sell $160 of items. If you've got a 6% EBITDA on that item, you've got to do basically 16.6 times the value in new product to make up the loss of the margin that you just lost because that thing went out the door. So this 16-to-1 return is a huge issue. Being able to prevent that theft is one way of doing it. Some people are locking merchandise up, but there are ways to do it without locking merchandise up to where you can use technology and do a better job. And we're going to talk about that today. We talked about the overall theft here at 142 billion. 200,000 per store is the annual cost of push out theft, which is people just pushing carts right out the door there. We've got another 4% of self-checkout revenue is lost to shrink there. And then you add to that slip and fall liability components that are a piece of this. And they're going to share a little bit later. There's going to be a story that talks about the repeat offenders in particular and the facial recognition technology that kind of blows my mind in terms of how many more stores that a criminal visits versus an average consumer. The only people that go to more stores are the district manager of that retailer. They're the only people that come close to that are going to be the people that are trying to steal from you. And this is why using technologies like facial recognition or vision intelligence is a major opportunity for you going forward. So we're going to talk about the financial case for facial recognition, theft reduction being a big part of that. 74% reduction in theft growth when it comes to using facial recognition, because you can identify who the offenders are when they walk in the store, alert authorities there. I always tell everybody, go to the Apex Loss Prevention Conference. It's like the AA of retail. You really get the truth of what's happening in retail when you go to that conference there. We're going to talk about all of these other statistics as well, as these are LPRC and gatekeeper statistics. So I will leave that to them to discuss. The big ones here is the investigations when using facial recognition, 91 times faster of getting those investigations done when facial recognition is used. Literally, you find out that your top suspects are visiting 6.3 times more stores. When you leverage facial recognition to actually see who's walking in the store, you realize, oh, this person was here, here, here. The average consumer doesn't do that. That at best, they go to 2 stores in a time period. They're not going to go to more than that. So when people start showing up at multiple stores, that is an indicator that something might be up and they're trying to rip you off. And leveraging this kind of technology makes a huge difference in finding those guys and preventing this theft going forward. Gatekeeper's own stats showed through a documented case study here, 80% reduction in push out theft when they use their technology at the store level. They've got some of the funniest videos. I think we're going to show one here in a second, just watching people try to push these carts out and it just stops there and they go head first into their merchandise they're trying to steal. I don't want to steal that thunder, but just a huge piece of the opportunity with that. And as you're going to hear from everybody, these are validated benchmarks. These are case studies, not just from IHL, not from Gatekeeper, but they come from even competitors here. Forrester's got a study, LPRC's got several studies here, and then we've got our own with IHL. So multiple different studies that are coalescing on this same thing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig. Invite Craig back on stage and go ahead and get started. Craig, tell us about Gatekeeper.
Hey, Greg, thanks very much. Yeah, before we get into some of the research, I'll tell you a little bit about Gatekeeper. We've been in retail loss prevention now for over 30 years. Specifically focused historically on two things that really drive the highest per event loss that retailers see: push out theft and repeat offenders. More recently with face first and facial recognition technology for the reasons that you've talked about and the efficiency that it brings in after the event or alerting in front of an event. But we're laser focused on it, and we're absolutely passionate about helping retailers reduce theft in a safe manner and making their stores safe for customers. So thank you.
So let's go ahead and share this video.
Sure.
Technologies offered by Gatekeeper systems help keep your staff safe, reduce shrink, and preserve a friendly shopping environment. Shoplifters get the unwelcome experience of a shopping cart that locks at the door. But that is only one aspect of the enhanced safety and loss prevention benefits that come from deploying Gatekeeper systems' innovative solutions. Theft intelligence services include the reporting and tracking of repeat offenders by our team of experienced investigators. Organized retail crime activity is flagged and can be sent directly to case management or criminal intelligence platforms. Case First software enhances and accelerates investigations, provides active threat alerts when a known offender enters a store, and protects customer privacy and appropriate use with integrated safeguards. In a 2023 LPRC research study, two equally qualified investigators approached the same case. One was assisted with Face First. The assisted investigator was 8 times faster, found activity in 2 times as many locations, and discovered 4 times the case value. Face First alerts instantly when a known offender enters any of your locations, helping keep customers and employees safe. Together, we can transform isolated theft incidents into actionable insights, providing much more than the value of goods recovered at the door.
Thanks for that, Greg. What's fascinating as we got into push-out theft, we realized that what in these push-out attempts on the video aren't really isolated incidents. These are like coordinated, multi-location activity from repeat offenders. We see roughly about 10 to 15% of the push-out offenders are driving about 80% of the loss in the stores. And as you pointed out earlier, with the 16-to-1 ratio, you start thinking about the amount of merchandise a retailer has to sell to offset a $500 cart loss, what that does, some of the other things that you talked about with in terms of out-of-stock challenges and the trillions of dollars that costs. All of that's impacted by this type of theft. So it's been a fascinating journey on what we're doing to prevent it. But with the addition of Face First, what we've really been able to change is the visibility of this. As we start to look at these offenders, we realized that we'd see them use a cart and then we wouldn't see them again after they got stopped at a store, which was great. And that's the idea, doing that in a nonviolent way. But if they didn't surface in another store with another cart, we didn't necessarily know. And what Face First provided us and our retail partners was the visibility of what was actually happening. What was the journey of that particular theft offender? How many stores did they actually visit? And then how do we be prescriptive and alert the store associates when a known offender from other stores, other locations of that retailers are coming in the store with some little highlights? Hey, a repeat offender, violent, don't approach, as you saw on the screen. There's really some opportunity to understand the full journey, put together a faster case, and improve the safety at the store by giving them real-time intelligence on what's going on in their building. And the research that you highlighted really isn't our data. it's a lot of work that LPRC and Corey and the great team at LPRC did about investigative efficiency and shrink loss and everything else. And I think Corey's going to take a few minutes here and walk us through what that looks like. But we're real excited about what all these technologies, when they're married together, can do for a retailer.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Greg. I'm going to review 3 studies today. One is the investigations efficiency study. One is a study that focuses on the extent of ORC and the impact that repeat offenders have on retailers. And the third really focuses on accuracy and bias. The first study I wanted to talk about is one where we worked with a grocer on the West Coast. And what we did, if we could just back up just a little bit to the previous slide. And what we did here is we had 2 investigators who were assigned to the same case to investigate it after it came in. These 2 investigators had very similar backgrounds, experiences with investigations, experience in the industry. Same case, same company. The only differences were that one was assisted by face matching technology, and there was differences in the time allocated for them to investigate the case. This retailer had already been using face matching technology. The investigator who was assigned to use face matching was given less time. They didn't want to duplicate the time committed to the study. And then the unassisted was given up to 18 hours to spend on the case investigating it. Next slide, please. And what we saw is we saw qualitative and quantitative differences in, 1, the way the investigations unfolded, and then 2, in all the outcomes of the investigations. So what we had both investigators do was take very detailed notes on their case. For every minute they spent investigating, what were they doing during that? What milestones were they achieving during? And what you can see is on the left, the unassisted investigator has very detailed notes, and this is from the first several hours, everything that he accomplished. He's going back and reviewing video from all these different stores. It's a very manual, labor-intensive process. The investigator who was assisted by face matching technology, in the first few minutes, had all of these matches across all of these stores. So instead of having to actually go through and manually try to identify all these places where this offender might be, create maps to try to understand the path of travel and all of that, did a federated search of all the locations and could identify where that offender was. This matters a lot, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do on the retail side is we're trying to get the attention of prosecutors and law enforcement. That requires you build a substantial enough case to draw their attention where they will want to spend time on it because it's a serious incident. There's a lot of work that law enforcement prosecutors have to do, and so they want to prioritize the most significant and substantial cases that they can. So this really matters. Next slide, please. In the end, you can see here on the table, the unassisted investigator ended up spending 904 minutes on it, just over 15 hours. The assisted investigator spent 117 minutes. The total case value, you can see, was 4.2, almost 4.3 times higher. They identified the subject in far more stores in far less time, identified 2 vehicles, 2 temp tags, and importantly, because of the real-time alerts, the investigator who was assisted continued to get alerts as the individual continued to show back up at the store. And so that allows this retailer to actually go and engage the subject whenever they show up in the store, and through that customer service, each time that individual departed the store. So it was able to really avoid several more incidents, as well as recover additional gift cards by identifying when the subject was coming into the store. That is those are the main findings from that study. The second study was really focused on how much ORC there actually is. This is one of the questions that has plagued the industry, and there's been a lot of estimates, some better than others, on how extensive this is. But the honest answer to the question of how much ORC is there is we do not have very good estimates. The only way to get good estimates is to be able to identify when these known bad actors go from store to store and understand exactly what their typical impact is during each visit to victimize a retailer. So Difficult to do unless you have a sensor that can detect when those known bad actors are showing up. Face matching technology is one of those opportunities. There's a lot of other ways of capturing intelligence and identifying when individuals are in stores, but this is one of the most reliable ways of seeing when known offenders are showing back up. This is critically important for a few reasons. One, when retailers are trying to justify a lot of their programs, they need to understand what the actual impact is of ORC at their stores, so they have a baseline and they can understand if they roll out any solution, what is the impact of that solution. They also can understand the ROI of their ORC investigations teams, as well as the impact and the return on investment of taking an offender off of the streets, either through incapacitation, through incarceration, or through rehabilitation in the criminal justice system. So, some pretty important reasons to conduct this study. Next slide, please. So one of the findings is just every single longitudinal panel study of offenders shows that a very small portion of the offending population are responsible for the majority of the harm done. This is oftentimes as little as less than 5% of the offending population that is contributing to greater than 50% of the harm, 50% of the incidents. Sometimes it's even more extremely distributed than that. On the other hand, there's also place-based research showing that specific places also tend to generate the most incidents. These individuals who are repeatedly victimizing retailers, they're not just victimizing retailers. Those who are engaged in the most frequent offending, victimizing a lot of people out in the community. There's a major finding in criminology, which is those who are engaged in the most frequent offending are also engaged in the most diverse offending a lot of the time. So we wanted to understand what these patterns are. We wanted to understand over the span of about 60 days, what were the patterns of offending among the most recently enrolled offenders, and then the top offenders, those who are identified as being the most frequent offenders being detected. Next slide, please. And you can see what we've got here are two charts. One is the average enrolled loss value for the 57 newly enrolled offenders for which we had data, and then you'll see the number of match events that were identified during this 60-day period. If you look, you can see that the average cart push-out value was about $270, and you can see that there's about 326 match events. So if you take the average loss and you multiply it out, total potential losses are about $92,000 over these 60 days. If you go back to Greg's comment earlier about what a retailer has to sell to make up for those losses, you can see the pretty extreme impact that it has on retail. But the same is true for your SCO intentional non-scans, concealment theft, gift card related theft, and so on and so forth. Coupon related and gift card related, you can see those as well. There was very little on the gift card related and coupon related, but that average is pretty high. Total, 156,000 per offender basis was about 2,700. That's the newly enrolled offenders. Now we're going to talk about the top offenders. Next slide, please. Now, one thing that you'll notice, and the thing that I really want to point out, is that these charts are scaled differently. So that last one, because of the gift card offenses, maximum was about $3,000. So the y-axis here is rescaled. So just pay attention to that first. But the cart push out on average was about 158 in this case. Concealment 50, counterfeit currency about 75, and so on and so forth. You can see all the average values for these top offenders. Now, the other thing that you should pay attention to is the far more frequent offending among this group of offenders. So if you look at the match events, I believe the last slide was like about 300 cart push out events with about 57 offenders, and here it's 101. But you can see there's 2,200 cart push-out events, 1,800 concealment events, almost 1,200 intentional non-scans, and so on and so forth. Extrapolate all that out to the total potential losses, and you're looking at $934,000. And the per offender is about 9,200 as opposed to 2,700 on the newly enrolled offenders during the 60-day period. So pretty extreme losses on the retailer's part. Next slide. Looking at the top offender, That individual had 374 face-first events in the 60-day time frame, 66 different stores multiple times. In many cases was hitting once in the morning and then once in the evening. And that makes sense if you have a path of travel where you're moving from your home out into the communities you're victimizing. You're going to take a path, then you're going to take a path back. Enough time will have passed where you can revisit some of those stores you visited earlier in the day. On average, 6.2 visits per day, and you can see how it all plays out here. There's a lot of activity. It's pretty extreme, and this is not uncommon among your most sophisticated offenders and those who are engaged in pretty widespread theft and victimization of retailers. Next slide. To give you a little bit more information, you can see how this all proceeds from June 9th through July 13th, the number of stores this individual was hitting. Can you proceed? So this gives you another way of understanding. June 21st, 3 stores, 9 stores, 3 states. June 9th, 13 stores. July 13th, 12 stores. June 18th, 12 stores. Just an incredible amount of activity among this offender. And it's very important for everyone within a company to understand this. You do not understand this level of offending unless you have a reliable way to detect when an individual is at a location. That can be done with some different technologies. Everyone's got a face, right? So this is one way to make sure that you're linking across all of those incidents and building the case that prosecutors will actually pursue. And because prosecutors will pursue it, law enforcement will spend the time investigating it. That matters a lot. If we're trying to drive action on prosecutors' behalf and law enforcement's behalf, we have to make sure prosecutors are prosecuting, because law enforcement don't want to waste their time, and work backwards from there. If we can get the prosecutors to prosecute, we can get law enforcement to be a little bit more active on investigating and addressing some of these issues. Next slide. So you can see the difference here between the newly enrolled offenders and the top repeat offenders. 3.5 times more on average. Average unique stores visited in 60 days. The frequencies, 7.2 times more. The potential losses, 6.2 times more. And then the annualized loss potential. Remember, this was only 60 days. So if you annualize this across the entire year, that's a much greater impact that they would continue to have. And those newly enrolled offenders, as they become more experienced and more brazen, they may begin to offend at the rates that your top offenders are, particularly if there's no consequences, if they see that they are able to victimize retailers with impunity because they're anonymous, they go undetected, they move through stores without being detected, then they can continue to engage in these activities. And then you can see finally the most prolific single offender, what that loss would be, and that's not even annualized. That individual can have quite an impact. Actually, that may be annualized, but regardless, pretty serious impact on the retailers. Craig, was there anything that you wanted to say about this study or the previous study before we move on to the accuracy study?
Yeah, listen, I think the investigative piece and the journey of offender that you've been showing is what's remarkable, and it's something that we hear regularly from our retail partners, right? The tool combined with other tools like PerCheck have really allowed them to aggregate cases, identify that journey of theft, and provide turnkey cases to the prosecutors who, as you highlighted, they need to prosecute cases, but they're stretched for resources, as are the retailers. So being able to automate this, tying into what Greg teed up from a computer vision standpoint, and bring this accurately to a high value case in the minimal amount of time with the highest opportunity for prosecution is just a big win for the retailers. And quite frankly, we all win because we get these people off the street when we hand the prosecutor a good case. So that'd be my commentary here.
Definitely. Thank you, Craig. Next slide. Craig just teed this up a little bit. Accuracy is a key part of this. Greg, and we've had a little bit of fun with names before in the lead up to this webinar, but Greg mentioned earlier that he's using Claude. I'm sure many of you are using generative AI today. And one of the things that just consistently amazes me is how good of a job a lot of this generative AI does in editing documents and finding things that even I miss. Ultimately, what we're finding is that it kind of works better when you have a human working with AI. That's what we were initially thinking with respect to artificial intelligence as it relates to face matching technology. We heard about bias in the models, the accuracy issues with the models, and there's bias everywhere. All models are biased. There's no perfect model. There's also no perfect person. There's a lot of biases that we have. Many of these are very well known, whether that's confirmation bias, whatever your assumptions are going into reviewing an issue. You're very likely to look for information that confirms what you already believe about an issue. Gambler's fallacy, this idea that there's a hot streak, and if you have not won a hand of poker in a while, that you're due for a win. That's not how probability works or anything like that. And then halo effect is another one that's pretty commonly known, which is we associate positive attributes and characteristics with others that have positive characteristics or attributes. So there's a lot of ways that the human mind is fallible and inaccurate and biased. When you talk about biased models, what you're ultimately talking about is really a statistical term of systematic inaccuracy in a model. One of the greatest concerns is around race and gender with these models. So that's something that the humans are not free of either. There's a pretty well-established literature around same race and same sex bias among humans. And the theory there is that, for example, I'm a white man. I grew up in a mostly white community, and so as I grew up, the faces that I was exposed to the most were those that looked like mine. And so I became very good at differentiating and recognizing faces of white people. That is true across all racial and ethnic groups that really exist and are trained within those types of communities. If you have a more diverse community, you're going to be better in general at differentiating a lot of different types of faces. Same thing with gender. Because of peer group affiliations and things like that, humans have those biases as well. I go through all of that to say that when we came into thinking about face matching, my initial thought was, okay, AI is good at a lot of things. Humans are pretty bad at a lot of things. Maybe the question shouldn't be, is AI biased? Maybe the question should be, are humans, when assisted by AI, less biased? And that's what this study focused on. It focused on the identification of offenders. Next slide. So what we did is we had fictional offenders and narratives, offense narratives. You can see the 8 fictional offenders. They were different combinations of sex, race, and ethnicity. We had white, black, Hispanic, and Asian, men and women. So 8 offender types with different race, racial, ethnic, and gender backgrounds. We then had loss prevention practitioners try to identify these fictional offenders from lineups of 20 people with similar characteristics. So you can see the example for the Hispanic male. What we did is we had different individuals review the images to see if they agreed that all of these individuals looked Hispanic. And then we selected images that had Hispanic men all with facial hair. We took a similar approach to the white male. We wanted to make sure that individual, all of the folks in the lineup also had facial hair and things like that. The reason we did this is because it's very difficult when you work in loss prevention or in retail and you see all of these faces all day long, particularly in communities that may be somewhat homogenous, right? You may see a lot of people from the same background. So it's a very cognitively intense job to remember all of these. So what we did is we had all these loss prevention professionals. Half of them ended up being assisted by output from face matching technology, and half were not assisted. And we wanted to understand who was more accurate. Next slide. What we found was that those who were assisted by face matching technology were far more accurate across all racial groups on average, far more. Identification accuracy for those who were unassisted, they were right about 23% of the time. For those who were assisted, it was 62.9% of the time. Chart doesn't say this, but because these were cooperative photos, the AI performed very well. Most models are very accurate today anyways, but the really surprising thing here is that even those who were assisted by facial recognition, if they had trusted the face matching technology more, they would have been even more accurate, but they didn't, which kind of indicates the importance of training and helping people to understand that what they understand about face matching technology and its accuracy may actually undermine its impact on improving the accuracy of matching. And so you could see the improvement here is about 7 times more likely. That was actually when we controlled for variation in the difficulty of the different forms. Every person who participated in this study, there was about 155 loss prevention professionals that participated, they were given a random combination of 5 offenders. And we wanted them to go through this process and make it as cognitively tasking as their typical job is. And so we did that, and that's controlling for those differences in the difficulty of the different offenders and the offense narratives. So that was that. And Craig, back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. That's fascinating, and I like your commentary about a human identifying with facial recognition assisted. In my time, and we acquired Face First as a company about a year and a half ago now. In my time, what I've really learned is, like anything you're doing, any work output, quality matters, right? So these algorithms and systems are highly accurate, but the image it gets of the incoming person matters. Quality images matter. When you're getting good quality images and not trying to do this from somebody, a bad image, they're highly accurate, and the level of assistance that this can provide for investigations and safety is, quite frankly, unprecedented. As Greg said earlier with Claude, right? We've all learned how to accelerate our work behavior with computer vision and AI-assisted technology. This is one of them that can really transform the game, and we're excited to see the impact this is going to have on safety and theft in retail. Greg, does that kind of line up with how you're looking at ROI and the commentary you made around facial rec and AI in retail, the way you did at the onset of this?
Yeah, and it's the payback of this is pretty significant. It's funny, when I ran some of this stuff through Claude, it just immediately created a return on investment calculator for me. Wait, I didn't ask for that. And I haven't had time to go through it to make sure it's 100% accurate. But if I threw it up on the screen, you'd be blown away. It's, whoa, thank you. Thank you. But it did. It created an ROI calculator for this. So the data here is just so strong. It really is ridiculous. And I think one of the things that I wish you guys would go into is, how does the technology work, in the sense that you're not necessarily taking somebody's face, you're zeroing in on characteristics of that face and putting it together so that you can find videos that have similar people. Because I think the political pushback, so to speak, of facial recognition is really a lack of understanding of how it works.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up. What's interesting, my father-in-law is in his 90s, and when I told him that we had purchased a facial rec company, his commentary is, I don't know if I'd like that going into the grocery store, and they know my name's Jerry and where I live. And I'm like, whoa, hang on for a minute. It really, the dime dropped on the education piece at that moment for me. I'm like, we're taking a biometric template, not a photo. It's in a private database, and it's for safety usage. And if everybody understood the accuracy and that we don't deal in names and personal information, it's a biometric template that allows immediate identification upon entry, just like you're using at customs or any place else. And I think if people really understood it, they would be very open to it. We wouldn't see some of the shifts in the tide constantly, depending on whatever the news piece is. So hopefully we can effectively spread that message and get people on board with the power of this technology for safety and for greater good when used in the wild environment far outweighs its invasiveness, if you will.
We've got all of these different things, and I would say there's a layer 5 that we didn't even talk about, which is human trafficking, kidnapping, child safety, etc. Here. It's a potential use of that same technology. We're willing to put pictures of kids on milk cartons back in the day to try to find kids, but we're not willing to use this kind of technology at a store to help there. And with the trafficking situation happening in this country and many others, this is like an incredible technology to help there as well. But with that, guys, that's the end of our presentation period. Now we've got a Q&A opportunities. And once again, you just go to the side there in the chat, ask your questions, and I'll bring Lee in to fire those up.
All right. Right off the bat, this one's for everyone. How does understanding the network nature of repeat offending change your approach to deploying, scaling facial recognition across a chain?
Oh gosh, I'll take a swipe at that, Corey. You may want to chime in as well. Quite an expert on all this. I think just The level of visibility, as we talked about throughout this, understanding that what may to one person have looked like a sub $70 event ended up a person that was costing tens of thousands of dollars to that chain. I don't know that we ever really would have connected the dots on that. And when you extrapolate that, the tens of thousands at a 16x of what just the sales required to offset that loss and break even is extraordinary. So I think that visibility is important to aggregate cases and go after the worst of the worst. But I also think being able to understand that helps better inform a more comprehensive strategy around loss and safety for the retailer that are going to pay dividends from reduced loss, improved margins, reduced out of stocks. I think there's a lot of things that when you're addressing this holistically and in a fortress type approach with a whole chain adoption, the insights you get really inform the strategy and I think can pay great dividends. Did I answer your question, do you think, Lee? Corey, anything to add?
I think that I just want to go back to what I said earlier, which is we know that a subset of the offending population is responsible for most of these incidents. The more locations that you're able to detect these individuals, the larger the case you'll be able to build, and the more attention you can draw to it. The investigative technique is just link analysis, and you can do this with a variety of different things, but face matching technology is one opportunity to identify all those places. If you only have it on the most risky locations, what you're going to miss are those organized individuals who are not just hitting those locations. They're actually moving out to the suburbs and other places because there's less heat there. But you won't pick those up if you're not able to detect at those locations, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, boy, that Northeast map sure depicted it isn't just the suburbs. It's the suburbs
with everything.
State, right? That's crazy. Yeah.
And that's what the sophisticated groups will do. They will do that because they, just for the same reason that they the most sophisticated groups try to remain nonviolent because that will draw more attention to them. That's right. Because law enforcement pays a lot more attention to violent crimes. They also try to reduce the heat by staying away from jurisdictions where there's a lot more attention on these issues.
Yeah, I looked at that map and I wondered, Craig, that's an expensive route. You got to steal a lot to make that worthwhile because you've got turnpike fees and tolls and traffic that you're going to get stuck in to hit all those stores. So.
Yeah, boy, that's especially with gas today, right? Think about that. That's wild. Yeah.
The thing about selling stolen product is the margins are, I don't know how you calculate the margins on free merchandise.
Yeah.
I guess they're near infinite. I don't know, but it's,
when your business cogs are zero, it's all good.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Next question here, Greg. At what point does technology adoption become a competitive survival issue rather than a competitive advantage issue?
It already has. I would say this is just one of many technologies, so many around inventory accuracy that are existential threats. As we've seen in our data with Amazon Prime members, you're literally 95% of those with households over $100,000 now have Amazon Prime. When they go to a physical store, they're going to that store because they expect you to have in stock what they want. And when you don't have it, they just whip out the phone. And you get about 2 times to be out of stock on something before they just give up on you for that category of item and move to Amazon. And that is really an existential threat there. This is just one of those technologies. When you have literally 89% of all fulfillment comes through a store, but only 50% of the transactions are walk-in transactions. That inventory loss affects not just the walk-in traffic, it affects your buy online, pick up in store, your ship from store, your overall categories for that. It hits everything. So that technology deployment, specifically around the inventory accuracy of which this fits into that, is just paramount.
Yeah. This one's for everybody. Is the theft basics focused given the economic issues, or is that not the case?
I'll start, and what I will tell you is, and really been doing cart-based push-out theft since its inception in 2007. The repeat offenders are always there. These are people that are stealing for a living, and as we've talked about on this, are professionals. based on our over 30,000 installations of our push-out technology, what I will tell you is the basics are going up exponentially. People that are stealing lettuce, milk, and things like that. Those type of theft events with reusable bags and mom in the yoga pants or dad in his work clothes coming in, middle-class people and above doing that often go undetected. So it is becoming a higher percentage than it's ever been of the, as I call it, opportunistic or situational theft versus criminals, so to speak, repeat criminals.
Yeah, and I would actually like to touch on that because that goes back to that known unknown. For a long time, a lot of retailers still have no idea. An example I like to use is infant formula has for a long time been a target of many organized retail crime groups. It's a relatively small product that's relatively expensive given its volume and its widespread availability. The question has always been, is the losses associated with that, is that a lot of individuals stealing 1 or 2 units for personal use or family use, or is this a very small group of those repeat offenders? With a technology like this that allows you to detect when the repeat offenders who are engaged in resale are showing up, you can begin to answer that question, which allows you to further tailor your program to target repeat offenders who are reselling versus those who are using for personal use. And those are probably very different strategies. But without something like this technology that allows you to detect when known offenders are showing up, you literally have no idea what is causing your losses. And if you define the problem incorrectly, you're going to define the solutions incorrectly as well. So that's one of the things that I think everyone needs to understand about all these losses. The other thing is, as economic situations change and individuals are looking for lower priced options, they will turn to the reseller market, right? You will still see more loss in those areas, but it may be going through the reseller market and being resold for a lower price than they can get it in the stores too.
Yeah.
So
that's taking your sales anyway, right? Taking your sales anyway. Yep. Double loss. Yep.
This one's for Greg. Regarding the K-shaped economy, how does the income polarization affect both the profile of theft activity and the urgency with which retailers at different price points need to prioritize loss prevention investment?
It's clearly coloring things in terms of more people who don't look like they will be stealing are stealing now based on a variety of different situations. And I expect it to increase, quite honestly, because when you have an expected way of living, and then maybe you have a disruption because your job got eliminated or something like that, you get placed into a situation where you're more tempted to do that. There are a lot of people that are really rich that just have a propensity to steal, and that's what they want to do. They do it for the thrill. And then there are other people that just are doing it because they think the stores are too rich or somebody owes them. There are other people that are doing it because they have the actual need. They just literally can't afford it. And then you've got the organized group there that are doing it as a profession. So how do you delineate between all of that? And it's all going up. And I think, as Corey said, this is the one tool that allows the prosecutors to actually prosecute, in which allows the police to actually make those arrests there because you can see it across venues. I don't know how that all works in terms of jurisdictions when a case is being brought together, but there's without question, as gas prices go up and the economy gets tougher and we have AI starting to take jobs in some cases, you're going to see this go up. And you're going to see people in situations that never thought they were going to be in those situations reverting to theft. And we're already seeing it in the self-checkout theft alone. People that are doing that never in the right mind would just take something off a shelf.
Well, Greg, I would add to that real quickly, as you sparked my thought on the self-check, was the continued evolution of point of sale types within bricks and mortar retail changes. You have scan on your phone, you have carts with smart technology in it, you have self-check, you have remote point of sale, mobile check stands. It blurs the lines of what theft looks like when back in the day you used to come through a checkout that had a 42-inch cattle chute between check stand 1 and check stand 2 that was indication of payment. That's all changed now, and you add that with reusable bags and open format stores. And there's a lot that's going under the radar in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people that retailers don't have visibility on. It's unfortunate.
Greg, we're past the top of the hour.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for Craig and Corey for being with us, and we appreciate that. We were going to put together the slides for you and the actual research report that is going to be going out later today. Look for an email from me, and thanks for joining, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend coming up, and thank you for being with us.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Greg. Love the IHL and the work you do. Corey, always great work out of LPRC. Really appreciate all you guys add to our industry.